Hey guys, this is Vladimir with a follow-up video series for Mastering Pot-Limit Omaha. And in this video, we want to talk about how to play from your small blind by cold calling preflop against a late position opener. We are cold calling preflop, so not 3-betting, but defending our small blind, which we are doing fairly tight. As you have seen in the introduction video and in the other videos, we are defending roughly 10 to 12% preflop by cold calling, and usually want to have a suited ace along with other decent side cards to be able to cold call preflop from the small blind. And in this video, it's going to be very theoretical, but I think it's really important to understand that it's crucial to know how your range is perceived by other players. Given that we are in a small blind, our range is, and we are defending fairly tight, but at the same 3-betting premium hands, our range is quite different to the range we are having in a big blind. So every time, and we've got an example here, we can get right way into it. Here we've got actually a multi-way pot, but it doesn't really matter, but just good enough to illustrate what's happening. So big button is raising, we are calling, and a big blind is coming along. We gave a button an opening range of 55% pre-flop, and big blind has got it like 50% cold calling, but not his 3-betting range, which is fairly tight. We are using a syntax here. You can find it on, if you Google 3-bet syntax, poker juice, this is a somewhat tight 3-betting range, which he is, and he's not 3-betting those hands. He would be 3-betting those hands if he had them. So basically we are excluding them from his cold calling range because he's never cold calling pocket aces and stuff like that right here. But he's got hands which he would 3-bet if I fold it in a small blind, but decides not to 3-bet them because multi-way he doesn't want to 3-bet to lose. So right here, as you can see, we are on a turn already. We get to the flop. As you can see, well, we are doing fine on this flop and all that stuff, but we are actually not doing too fine. 60% multi-way is fantastic in Pot-Limit Omaha. But what we want to talk about right here is that comparing to the paired boards we talked about in a different video, every time the board texture is low card heavy, and you're sitting in a small blind, well, it doesn't really matter if it's a small blind or any other position, but every time your range is tight pre-flop, you cannot attack low card board textures. You are forced to play passively and just flat call and call and hope to get to the showdown, and basically you are forced to have a strong check calling range, and to have a strong check calling range, you must include the hands you want to check raise. So basically you are putting even the nuts and even the premium nuts you would usually go for raise into your calling range, just because you don't have that many nuts and premium nuts, well, not premium nuts, but nuts with redraws in your range at all. You will flop like a set, you will never flop a set with a flush draw here. 8-8-7-6, unless it's double suited, you will probably 3-bet it. So it's very difficult to flop a super strong hand here on such a flop like that. Or even 6-5-4. You will have 7-8. You will have 7-8-9, like Ace King 7-8-9, or even here Ace King, or basically Ace 9-7-6 double suit. But you probably 3-bet it. But no, you could have it. But you just don't have that many combinations of those hands because you're forced to usually have an ace high suit in the small blind when defending, or you have an offsuit ace. So basically you do have a suit but not a nut suit, but then your side cards should be higher ranked. So let's say you've got something like this hand. We are folding pre-flop, right? We are not defending it, and if you were to make it, let's say, queen high suit, we are not defending that hand either pre-flop. So what I mean is that if you have something like that with a queen high suit, then you are forced to go along and increase the other side cards and make them higher. So something like that you would be calling. But as you can see, on this type of flop, you completely bricked. which means it is fairly difficult to hit a board like that. That means that you are forced to just check call all the time on low card board textures. And something else that's important is that if you are UTG in opening and the same situation arises, it's the same spot as you are if you're in the small blind. And same thing happens in 3-bet and 4-bet pots. If your range is narrowed to sort of high card heavy hands or lower card heavy hands, or it's basically pure aces. Let's say you've got a 4-bet pot going on and your 4-bet preflop, and everybody knows you've got aces for the most part. There is like, and the flop comes down 4, 5, 8, right? Like here, you just get it in because you have to get it in, given that your opponent will he will correctly put you on aces every time and figure out, well, you could fold, but that means you can't afford to wait on 4, 5, 8 like for a straight if your range is just aces every time, because you will never come up with 7, 6 and end up folding every time. So back to the small blind and what we can do right here to figure out the best strategy is that if we have, like, obviously we are just folding this on a flop and nothing we can do, but if we go back to a hand like we had, and what did we have again? Oh, well, are we defending that? Nope, we are not defending that because we've got a jack. We are not even defending this hand. That's just way too weak. So, well, no, we are defending this hand. Yeah, we are defending that hand. So, even on a flop like that, and as you can see, we have got even more equity now. It doesn't really matter what you flop here. If you're playing against opponents who are aware of what you're doing, you want to play game theory optimal. And in this case, it would be just to check call the flop. Now, you will change your strategy depending what players you're playing against. So in this case, if you know the big blind is splashy or the button just gets it in every time he's got something, or he doesn't like folding, then obviously you want to check raise and change your strategy. But for the most part, if the board texture is low heavy and you're sitting in a small blind, what you do is you just check call. And by that, you can include hands which seem weak and would be exploitable to check call. So let's say we've got something like Queen, Jack. Something like this, we can then start check calling. Here we've got a multi-way pot, which will be, I mean, we are not check calling this hand if the big blind bets and the button calls. Well, actually we could because we've got backdoor wrap and stuff, but our flusher is just too weak. But we can still call because their ranges are usually gonna be made straights and two pairs and stuff. So our equity is doing fine, as you can see here, but we don't have a betting range for big blind yet. But if we basically remove, let's see, disable from calculations, here we go. If you remove the big blind from the hand, as you can see, we are doing fine against the betting range. I think we got the right betting range here. 8 plus and queen queen. And we could actually change it and go ahead and say it's going to be at least two pair. So 8-5 plus. So equity will change. Yeah, so we've got just 30% equity here. But what I mean is that you want to play those hands profitably. And to do so, you want to build a check calling range that's very, very strong. Just because this board texture is so bad for you. And to do so, you want to flat call as much as possible. You don't want to check raise at all. Now, though, if you change the board texture, and if you've seen in the other videos, this is really important thing to understand. If you go ahead and make it something like this, I mean, actually, look at this. We've got 30% equity here. Now it's going to rise because we've got a rep with a flush draw and stuff like that. We've got 53% equity right here. And we'll change his range and go ahead and make it 9-8 plus and queen 8. And then we can actually go ahead and say he's got 10 jack, but that's with a diamond diamond. A 10 jack plus. So he's got now a straight draw, but it's not a straight draw, it's a flush draw. At least if he's betting, and he's betting naked flush draws, which are queen high and better as well. So as you can see here, it's a flip. But what I mean is that the higher the board texture comes, the better it is for you. Right here, obviously, you do have a check raising range because you have so many draws on this type of flop, which you want to put the money in. I mean, perhaps, well, this hand is fine enough as well. I mean, it's just too strong. So basically, or if you actually change it and give it a wrap, which you can have as well, it's going to be monstrous. So you want to fast play those hands. Therefore, you do want to check raise 7, 6, 10 with a flush draw like ace 10, 7, 6. You do want to check raise those hands because you do have enough draws which can balance it, and the draws, they want to get it in right here just because they want to collect the money in the pot by making him fold a better hand potentially, and you want to get the money, all his money, at the times you improve, and therefore you want to get it in. However, on a flop like we had before, if you make it like this, first of all, there are still draws. Like, well, actually, they're just, there are draws here, but you don't have value hands as often here. You do have 7-9 and 7-9-10 and stuff like that, but you don't have sets as often anymore because 8-8 is a smaller part of your range compared to, that's our hand actually, compared to if it's a 9, you've got more pocket 9s in your range than you do have pocket 8s. And here actually you've got more. You can represent 9-9, 8-8, 7-6. You can represent draws. You can represent bluffs. You can represent blockers sometimes and stuff like that. So the higher the board texture becomes, the more you want to play aggressively. Just because your range, again, from the small blind is very tight.